right. I think we're still connecting. Here we go. We're live. Hi, everyone. Super excited for the second session. I mentioned in the previous session, I mentioned that we need more senior leaders, people who have done this before in Europe, and we've got three in the chat talking about you. Thank you so much for taking the time. Want to get a lot more practical. Want to dive into stuff like recommendations, how people actually can make it in Europe, how to be successful in partnerships. And with that, I will hand over to you guys to introduce yourselves. Christine, do you want to go first?
Yes, sure, Rob. Yeah, welcome everyone, and super excited to be here. Nice to meet you all. So I'm Christine. I'm currently leading partnerships in Europe at Contentful, which is an API-first cloud-based content management solution. And I have worked in partnerships since 2009. So we just talked about the experience in the session before. So started in channel partnerships, and before that I was in a sales role. So have worked with two different models, the typical channel reseller model and nowadays the referral model with digital agencies and SIs and technology partners as well.
With that,
handing over to Daniel.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, so I'm Dan. I'm our Global Senior Director of Partnerships here at Reveal. Been in the company since April this year, previously a Reveal customer, and ironically before that, I was a customer of Reveal's biggest competitor before that as well. So I know the account mapping space and the partnership landscape very well.
And I will finish the presentation. So I'm Alex. I'm the new VP Open Innovation and Partnership at Sodexo, which is a large corporate group. And before that, I was head of partnership for Sunday App, which is a very well-known startup in France, but also across Europe and in the US. So very glad to be there. Thank you, Rob, for this meeting and this conference.
Love it. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm the CEO of Superglue, a partner engagement platform. I love that we have people from. We announced that we said we're going to talk about the UK, Germany, and France. So we have all of these nationalities represented. Though we might talk about additional stuff. Actually, I don't know, Dan, if you're British. You are.
Me?
Right? Yeah.
I'm as British as they come. I mean, my dad's Italian, but I'm a terrible Italian. I'm very British.
Good. I'm still German. I get my American citizenship next year. So we've got a European panel right here. Let's talk about mistakes, because I remember when we started building our partner ecosystem, when I started to do this stuff like roughly 7 years ago, I had no idea what I was doing. And I didn't know who to talk to, didn't know Christine back then. The biggest mistake that I made, I tried to do everything at once. We focused on Germany before we went into other regions, which I think was smart, but we tried, literally everything at once, and only over time, like the biggest mistake I made was not figuring out ideal partner profile or what we start with, and that created massive problems. We burned a lot of money and we wasted probably 2 years just with the wrong partners, the wrong initiatives, bothering our product team with stuff that they shouldn't have, worked on. So with that, hand it over to you. Maybe Alexandra, do you want to start? What do people don't get? What don't people get about partnerships in France? What are the mistakes you made or that you see people making?
I won't say about mistakes. I would say I learned a lot of things in my 2 last experience at Deliverect and Sunday. And the first thing is we need to get involved with the CEO, especially when you launch a partnership strategy in France. It's not current. You don't have this kind of culture. People don't work very closely together all the time, even if it's a job that does exist everywhere. But most of the time you create your own job if you want to do that. It's not the CEO saying we need a partnership job, a position in the company, and it's more than just saying, okay, now we can do partnership at scale because we have the support of the CEO. And at Sunday, it was very true when we started to work, for instance, with the POS system. They don't trust just a guy coming from nowhere saying, yeah, we have the best solution on the market, we need to integrate. And integration are very important now in the SaaS industry to I think, push this partnership position everywhere. But you need the support of the CEO. And if I need to start again in a startup at one point, I will make sure that the CEO is aligned with the fact that we need his support. We need also the fact that everyone in the company need to understand what we do at Partnership. I would say that first.
Yeah. Then yeah. Oh, Christine, actually,
I just want to say that's actually a good point to be aligned with C-level. So I would like to relate to both, and then also say something that we maybe made a mistake about, whatever. So first of all, when I joined Contentful, we had maybe a handful of partners, and it was about building that network. Initially, it was even a global role, but then quickly we hired somebody for the US market. Contentful started in Germany, so we didn't go on this journey coming from the US to Europe, but we had that European perspective or German perspective to start with. And so we did a little bit of the same, that we said, okay, we need a partner network. Let's reach out to everybody, build up, a certain number of partners, and then figure out over time who are the good ones. What are actually the criteria we want to look at, right? Is it size? Is it certain expertise and a certain with a certain offering, right? And which then also develop naturally. So I would probably do the same, doing this all over again, saying, okay, you look at product market fit and what are the types of partners, but then you still need to figure out, how committed are your partners? What is the ideal size? What kind of roles do you need at the partners? So it's a little bit of a learning journey, right? And then you get better and better at it. To Alexandre's point about C-level needs to be involved. So this was a long journey at Contentful also. Initially, we were just by ourselves on our partnerships island, and then sales did their own thing and marketing did their own thing, and company strategy, was supposed to be global. We looked how we could fit in, and we worked over years. I've been with Contentful for over 6 years now, to get that buy-in, right, on executive leadership level, right? And we also tried multiple reporting strategies. So initially we reported to the CEO, then sales, then marketing, and now back to like a CRO who oversees the field org. So can relate to both. And the biggest mistake I would like to point out, though, is something we probably made over time, because we hired partnerships in the US, more leadership in the US, and our US sales leadership looked at Europe as one market, and I can also totally relate to the UK is not Europe. Our sales director even had this on one slide in our last QBR. But we looked at one number for Europe, one sales number, one number of how many partners should we have. We gave, the team grew over time. We gave everybody the same goal, but they were in different markets. So biggest mistake looking at this one number, because it totally distracts from what you actually need to do in the different markets. One might be more mature than another. Initiatives might be different. In one market, you go deeper with your partners already. In the other one, you still need to build up your network. So from the beginning, unless you start off with 1 or 2 people where you actually do Europe, and then you maybe go with early adopter markets like the UK or Nordics first. But as soon as you start to regionalize, really look at each individual market, look at the total addressable market, and adjust the numbers and the goals.
I love that point about averages, right? Like the problem with averages, right? You average everything and you totally misunderstand the different markets. And if you take averages for different types of partnerships that have totally, and we're getting into in the next question, but you can totally misalign everything. Yeah, Alexander.
Just what I think it's truly important to understand that less is more. When you do partnerships, sometimes you want to talk to everyone. You want to open every channel possible because you think that leads are the most important. But if I learned something with the team, an amazing team I had at Sunday and at Deliberate, less is more. You need to focus on the right partner, and that's why you need scorecard. You need to structure actually the market of partnership.
And sometimes the best word you can say in partnerships is no. Like you're a great person. I'd love to go for a beer with you. I'd love to drive a conversation forward, but this is going to use up a lot of our resource and time, not effectively driving revenue for each other's businesses. And that's a good conversation to have, just like it's good for an AE to close lost an opportunity if it's not going to go anywhere. So win some time back.
I love that point.
And actually, you can build trust on this kind of conversation. Because when you start a conversation saying we are not going to work now together, it's not a closed door. It's just saying it's not the right timing for both of us.
I love that point. I think it's so strong because it's so hard. It's hard in sales, and I learned that in sales too, right? Saying no or getting a no in sales is very powerful, and people misunderstand that. They keep dragging these conversations on. And the same is true in partnerships. Like, you need to, very often you have very strong signals the stuff doesn't work, but you just ignore them. And especially if you're starting to build stuff, especially if you're in a market like Europe where stuff might be harder or getting the first people on board might be harder. Christine, I think you had a point.
Yeah, so my thought, I know we need to move forward, but like my point was, you can only start saying no when you understood your perfect partner profile.
Yeah. Yes. Right? Yeah. Exactly. Both. Yeah. Both is so hard. Yeah. Let's talk a bit about the different markets. Like, how we kind of brought this up, but how different are the markets? And I mean. Maybe you can even tell me, and I know there is no good answer to this, but like, what markets do you recommend maybe to go into or to consider, etc. Daniel, I think this was one of your favorite questions when we when we talked beforehand. I hand it over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I've my last two roles were working for American software companies that had pretty heavily established partner programs in North America, and it was a case of, right, let's kind of try to replicate this as best as possible across in Europe. So it's definitely my background, like looking at what markets do we focus on and where do we spend time. But I think Europe is an incredibly partner driven territory, and if you think about like a law of large numbers story, I looked at LinkedIn data for arguably one of the most partner centric organizations in the world, Microsoft. Everything that they do as a business tends to go through the channel or through partnerships in some way, shape or form. And if you look at the market by market partnership employees, you'll see that actually 10% of Microsoft global partnership team, they're based across these three territories of UK, France, and Germany. So they're investing very, very heavily in those regions as a business. And I think those are three incredibly strong countries to go to market to. And then if you extrapolate those three markets out further, it was in 2019, Satya Nadella, who's the Microsoft CEO, he said that partners make up 95% of his business. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure of the latest numbers, but let's say like 90% to be safe. And Microsoft's trailing 12-month revenue as a business, that's $200 billion, which if you times it by the 10% of partner team globally and the 90% of the business being done through partners, then you end up with about $18 billion flowing through the UK, France, and Germany across through partners. And a little bit of extra data on top of that, IDC did a report, and I posted about this a bit earlier today, but they found that every dollar spent on Microsoft is generating $10 for its partners. So if you extrapolate that out further in the regions of UK and Germany and France, that's not just $18 billion flowing into Microsoft through that partner ecosystem, but that's $180 billion of revenue flowing into the Microsoft partner ecosystem. So that's ISVs, it's distributors, it's resellers, it's MSPs. And just by that concept of law of large numbers, there is so much revenue that's already being generated in and around. That's just one ecosystem player. If you think about AWS, GCP, Salesforce, HubSpot, all these other big ecosystem players, there is so much revenue being generated in those three markets alone across Europe.
I love it. Christine, markets. One thing that I can note, like what I always found interesting, is the Germans are very consulting heavy as a market, right? Like, Germans love consultants. I don't know if others are aware of that. Can you confirm that, or like the work with SIs, and like, how do you feel about markets? Like, how are markets different in Europe? What are your favorite markets?
Yeah, they love consultants and their local partner, right? So
yes.
I actually get the question quite a lot, especially from North American partners in our ecosystem, how they should expand to Europe, which markets should they go to first. Many enter through the UK and agree with what we said before. It becomes a very competitive market, which we see as well. Some start entering through Amsterdam, actually, because that's becoming a very international hub right? And also English speaking. So lots of tech companies are starting to be there. So it's a nice community, right? That is establishing in Amsterdam. With regards to partnerships, so also I agree with the fact that it's a good start to enter a new market through partners. So you need to understand the partner network. And so besides the UK, where everybody goes anyways, I also agree that DACH and also Germany and France are the next biggest markets in Europe. I would also like to look at the Nordics, right? Because the Nordics, and I was a sales director for the Nordics in the past, working with the channels. So I have a heart for the Nordics as well. And it is a very, very partner-driven market, relatively small community, only 25 million inhabitants. So they all know each other. But once you are known as a technology and as a person, right? As a brand, as a in this partner network, you can grow pretty fast, right? So it's a market that is an early adopter, so they're not shy to try out new technologies.
Yeah.
So you can also try maybe a new idea out and then adapt for the other markets. So Nordics, again, small market, you will not have huge amounts of revenue, but good to start with, or good for early adopter.
Yeah.
And
I love that point.
Yeah. DACH. Yes, it's DACH, Germany. I mean, DACH is also Switzerland and Austria, but Germany, obviously being the biggest one, is very decentralized. So whereas in other countries or markets, you have like London as a hub and Stockholm and Amsterdam, Paris, and so on. In Germany, you need to be everywhere, right? And you can't with your office, so you need your partner network. And like you said, Rob, it's German companies, and we have a very big Mittelstand, so small, medium-sized companies in Germany. They need the input from their local partners, and they often have long-term relationships with those. And these can also be consultants, right, that they hire over time or for a longer time period. And so yeah, you need to be present. You need to be present in Berlin and Hamburg and Munich and Cologne and Frankfurt, all these different cities. We actually do meetups, right? We go around the country and do meetups with our community, and and build that decentralized network as well. And then France, as this is the third market we're having in focus here. I also lived in France, worked in France, so I would say I understand the culture, speak the language. So my second side of my heart is with France, and actually we hear from our French partners, if you want to be successful here, first of all, you need a local presence, and you need to be at least as good or even better than the leader in your space, if there is another leader, right? If you're the first one, then then it's maybe even harder to establish your brand and your solution. But really, everything needs to happen locally: local language, local team, relationship building, local communities. So it's great, Alexandre, right, that you built this partnership community in France. I actually want to look into this.
It was one of the
goals. Super cool. And also our French partners say the companies in France, they're looking to the north, right? They're looking at Germany, they're looking at UK and Nordics, what they do, and then they follow, 3 years later, right? So there's a little bit of a north-south order that you can follow when you enter Europe, I would say.
I think it's also linked to the fact that, in the north, they speak better English than in the south.
Yeah,
that's definitely the case. We've seen we open 8 countries in Europe, and we try to open Germany, but I think it also depends on the type of product you have. When you're a SaaS company, it's easier to enter a market because you don't have all this barrier that can be real when you are not a SaaS, like a POS system, for instance. For instance, Toast is a very amazing POS system in the US, starting in the UK right now, but there is not a lot of chance that it will be successful in France, for instance, because laws are different, because Christine said very important thing. I guess you have to be better when you enter into a market than the leaders, because they like to work together. In France, you buy things that are built by French guys, but if you buy another product, it means this is very the best of the best. And that's the hardest thing, but it's true for many countries. When you want to open, I love POS system, and there is great SaaS POS system in France. When they want to go to Italy or want to go to Spain or to UK, they struggle to find the right resellers because they prefer to work with Spanish or Italian POS system. And to finish on the German part, when we opened Germany, we realized that actually 90% of the people were paying cash. So we wanted to put in place a solution where people were going to pay with their phone, where actually it's definitely not the right market to open. Nordics are way better to use their phone and QR codes and all this technology to pay. So you need to identify the right markets also to enter based on your product, because definitely there is opportunity everywhere, but the culture in place, how you work, how people are, the B2C side is very important for your product to be successful, and your partnership programs too, because you can integrate every POS in Germany. Doesn't mean that your product will work at the end, because people won't adopt it, for sure.
I love that point. When I prepared the previous session, I looked into tech adoption in the US and in Europe. And the interesting thing is overall tech adoption, big enterprise, is pretty similar. I was almost shocked that's why I didn't use it. But I think what we're neglecting is the way that they measured, they looked at certain technologies, right? And looked at to what extent they're used in enterprise. But I think if you go deeper and look at the specific time of tech and tech adoption for specific technologies and the range of tools that are in place, it's very different, right? Like tech adoption is high in both markets or in the different markets, or maybe high, but what people then actually do is very different in each market. And yeah, I think Germans liking to still paying everything in cash is a very unique German thing. Like in Berlin, for example, it's going to be very hard to go to a restaurant and pay with a credit card. Like people still don't believe it, but it's going to be tough. We only have 5 minutes left, but I think we had so many great points. Let's talk a bit about co-selling. Daniel, I'll hand over to you. This is something that obviously you know a lot about. Let's talk about co-selling in Europe.
Yeah, I think co-selling is, firstly, it's a fine art. Like I don't think every partnerships organization has kind of got it right very, in all instances. And I think we always need to hold our hands up and be honest when we think we could be co-selling better. But I think the opportunity to co-sell in Europe is incredibly large. But the thing I would say is it's definitely harder than doing it in the United States. And I'd say the big reason behind that is, generally speaking, we are working with much smaller budgets. And in co-sellings, you're asking a client to stretch their budget to encompass a range of different solutions and services, or you're working with that potential end customer you're working with your partners to see, like, can we both cut some SKUs out of our offering to kind of come within that total budget. Like, and if you look, and I go back to Microsoft again, because I think they are the kings of the ecosystem, that $200 billion of trailing 12-month revenue that they've got, 105 of that is in the United States, and the other 95 billion of that trailing 12-month revenue is classified as other countries. So no other single country apart from the US accounts for more than 10% of Microsoft's total revenue. So in Europe, we are fighting for much smaller pockets of total revenue when it comes to those co-sell opportunities. So we just need to be smarter with what are our cost efficiencies that are going back to the client. But even more importantly, let's be really clear on the joint value we're creating so they can't say no. So we love a deal in Europe. We love being efficient with our spending, and that has to reflect in the way that we co-sell.
Alexandre, how do you feel about co-selling in Europe?
Yeah, I would say that it's easier to co-market a product than co-sell. That's for sure. And it will depend on the definition of co-selling, because you can. It's very hard to train another team that is already focusing his attention on their product, and sometimes they have multiple products to sell or services. So co-selling is the last strategy I used for the last few years, because it was easier to co-share a booth on a trade show or stuff like that to really get attention from the partners. And when co-selling worked, we had to put a lot of energy on the ground with their team to make sure they understand the product. And the last point was, who is going to get the money? Because when you co-sell, you don't want to send 2, 3, or 4 bills to your customer. Maybe you once need to handle that. And that's a very important point because everyone wants to actually cash the money. So it's in Europe, it's very difficult to co-sell for now. That's why we created, I think, also partnership with the community to make sure that the partner manager can meet together, can understand where they can fit on their product, on the market, and what all the strategy they can put in place. But co-selling is definitely something we need to push, but not sure it's today's focus.
You know what? I never thought about it this way, but I agree. We did. I was surprised how easy it was to co-market even with big players. And then co-selling required more work. At the same time, I think it is, once you get it to work, it's beautiful. There's a lot of potential. But Christine, maybe what's your take on all of that?
Yeah, so actually, I think we're doing pretty well with co-selling in EMEA. I think it's based on a really strong relationship with your partners, and again, top 5 key partners per market, not everybody. Have the teams like each other, so they work with each other. We also introduce our key partners to our sales team, so they build a relationship as well, and they often have direct conversations and help each other in the deals. Then enablement, right? You need to be really good with enablement to make sure the partner teams, they really know your product, they know how to position it. This is specifically true for the solution partners, system integrators. For technology partners, it's more about helping each other in deals, helping each other with intel, finding the right stakeholders maybe at the customer to then kind of close the deal together. And and we're now going even a step further and say, okay, account planning, right? So now we've won customers together. Hey, partner, come back at the same table and let's talk about what could be the next projects with these customers.
I love these points. I think you're totally right. Like, you need to spend more time on enablement, building trust, building loyalty. Once you have that, like you said, once you've passed that initial reluctance, it's really, there's a lot of potential. With that, we're out of time. I mean, there's so much more. We had so many more questions. Thank you so much. We need to do this again. Really appreciate your input and your insights. I learned a lot today. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks very much.